Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us here today. The time is now just gone 11:30, so we'll get things started. I'm Steve Bevan, Sales Executive for Team Software's EMEA region, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to today's webinar, our second Timegate and WageStream online debate. The Timegate and WageStream collaboration joins the forces of two market-leading solutions, and this relationship was forged to provide a financial wellbeing platform to all Timegate users. Today, you will hear about the significant benefits this is delivering across the sector. We hope you find this an enjoyable and insightful debate. I'm now going to hand you over to our host, Rollo Davies, who will introduce you to our special guests and begin our discussion. Thank you, Rollo.
Thanks very much, Steve. Cheers for that. It's quite an honour today. I'm going to be talking to two people who have quite a big impact in the security industry. They're both highly respected thought leaders. Firstly, James, could you introduce yourself, please, sir?
Morning, Rollo. I'm James Bancroft, and I'm the Group Managing Director of the Exclusec Group, and thanks for having me today.
And Peter.
Morning, Rollo. Morning, everyone. Peter Harrison, Managing Director, FGH Security.
Great to have you here. Thank you very much for attending this morning, gentlemen. Just a few things. Firstly, earned wage access. Now, I heard about WageStream, first of all, about 18 months ago. I was listening to a radio broadcast and tuning in and out. I heard lots of things being mentioned about being charity-backed and it putting to bed payday lenders, earned wage access, income streaming. I heard lots of things like that. But mainly it said it was to increase financial well-being of the staff and the people that use it. How do you see financial well-being, James?
I think for us it's a real difficult one, because ultimately financial well-being is around having the feeling of having sufficient money to cover obligations and commitments, which can be a challenge and is an ever-increasing challenge across not only our industry but the labour provision industry, really.
Peter, I mean, has your organisation required a financial wellbeing strategy, and how did you know it did?
It's interesting what you said actually about the payday lenders, and it was perhaps maybe 10 years ago it first came to light that some of our workforce were using payday lenders, and when they got themselves into real bother, this was pre any regulation, and they were getting charged, sometimes thousands of percent APR. So we wanted to stop it, and the first thing we did is said, look, we'll do two things. One is we'll give you an advance on your wages whenever you want it. But also, if you want to apply for a loan for any particular reason, do so. And some people came forward, and we managed to, on occasions, we'll help someone purchase a car, a house, or pay off bad debt they've got. And they can pay that back interest-free. Now, what we found is quite a few people used that, but when we moved over to WageStream, the usage actually went up. And I spoke to a few people in passing, and I said, look, why did you never come to us for that many sort of pay advances in the past? Because we looked at the data from a couple of years ago, and we look at the data now. And what we've put it down to is sometimes people are a bit embarrassed to ask as well. They've earned this money, but they don't want to make contact with the office or with the line manager and say, look, I've had something come up this month. The washing machine's broken. I need some help, or the kids, the school uniforms are due, whatever it might be. So being able to do it through that technology-driven solution, touch of a button, has really helped the people on the front line.
That's fantastic.
Sorry, that's a long answer. My rest will be far faster, Rollo.
There's no stopwatch on you, gentlemen. Please take as long as you want. So we've spoken about financial well-being, and obviously it's a great use to your people, but in a nutshell, what is WageStream? I've had people ask me this, and so yes, Rollo, it's income streaming, and yes, it helps people out in times of crisis or emergency, and helps people get to payday if unexpected bills come in. But what is WageStream? How does it work with your company, James? What's WageStream?
I think it's, for us, there's two elements really. There's the element of the access to earn wages, as and when they're earned, and we've seen around about a 43% enrolment figure across the piece, and that started quite slowly in the implementation, but obviously as time's gone on and colleagues talk to each other, employees talk to each other, and learn the benefits of WageStream, obviously that has increased quite significantly as we move along. I think one of the points that I'd also make is aside from the earned wage access, it's the save stream, it's the access to save, to make savings through the app. And we've seen that 36% of those 43% that have enrolled are actually using the facility to save through WageStream, and set targets. And the average goal that's being set by an employee currently is about £235. And we kind of, we run team talks that suggest using SafeStream to save for SIA licenses if they're not company paid, for example, or for Christmas or for other occasions. And we've seen, the feedback that we've had both anonymously and through our monthly feedback is that our business would be a very much different place without WageStream.
So it's not just income streaming or earned wage access, then it's got a saving mechanism. How do your staff access that? Is it an online thing, Peter? How do you?
Yeah, so it's an app, and it's linked to, we use Timegate. You can use WageStream with other systems. Timegate works is our rostering and workforce management system. Essentially, you finish a shift, and as long as the shift is verified, either by control room or the GPS function that you're using or manager verifications, your wages instantly become accessible or a proportion thereof. So we chose 50% so that people have got a little bit left over for the tax and the national insurance. But people could work a shift today, finish at 8 o'clock, 15-20 minutes later, it's an app, click a few buttons and the money can be transferred to your account for a small fee.
That's fantastic. I mean,
I think, Roland, where it's really helped us as well in the nighttime economy, we've got a professional organisation, hundreds of employees. We have to run a monthly payroll cycle. And that's fairly normal for your corporate security officer, your retail guard. Not as normal in the events industry, and definitely not normal in the nighttime economy. I'm up against competitors who it's still brown envelope at the end of the night. So WageStream has helped combat that, and it's like, look, it's not brown envelope at the end of the night. It's fully legitimate, but in terms of access to what you've earned, when you've often gone out and worked at more than your 40 hours a week, this is probably a casual employment on a Saturday. Getting that access to what you've earned is fairly instant.
So it's a much easier way to compete with the sort of companies you're talking about that are the brown envelope brigade.
Well, if I can just add on to that as well, if that's okay. Obviously, Peter alluded to some key points there, and it's interesting in terms of that wage advance percentage, because that can be set company by company. So obviously, Peter sets that at 50%, we set ours at 40% as well. And some of the key bits which Peter mentioned there on the brown envelopes was one of the key factors as to why we brought this in, because what it allows us to do is give those employees access to their own wages. So if they're then tempted to go and work at weekends, cash in hand for the brown envelopes, and do excessive amount of hours or shifts, then they technically don't need to, because as soon as they've done a shift with us, then that a percentage of that is available for them to access straight away. Once that's, as Peter said, once that's been approved or arbitrated through for the relevant systems.
No, fantastic. Now, gentlemen, I know you both have an enviable reputation in the industry for looking after your people and being close to your staff. During the pandemic, how's that affected your staff and your organisations in general? Peter?
It is tough. We do a quarterly survey We call it the ENPS. It's the Employee Net Promoter Score. So one simple question, which we use as a KPI, and the question is, how likely would you be to recommend FGH security to a friend? They can take from that what they wish. It could be a friend who could be a customer, it could be a friend to come and work for us. And we did see a drastic decrease. And I think what we put it down to, we then surveyed the workforce more, and we've spent more time with them. We've had to change so much, and sometimes you only see what's happening in your operations side of the business, in the finance side of the business. And a big thing for us was not having the summer festivals and events, a chance where we can all get together. There's often a team barbecue, team briefings, you're rubbing shoulders with each other. And we thought we'd done a good job as a support team, in the sense that, I'm sorry, your events aren't there, but we have secured your work on testing sites, on retailers and grocers, on COVID marshal duties at universities, and no one's gone without in terms of financial well-being, but what they've lost is this teamwork. So trying to recreate that is a real challenge when people are working on their own. You know, we've took on very sociable people who are very team orientated and love being around others for the customer service skills, and then we won't put them on their own somewhere. That's the biggest change for us. Not too related with wage stream, sorry.
No, that's perfectly right. James, how's Exclusec been coping during these strange times?
I mean, not too dissimilar, and I think that there is plenty of work there. It's just different work, and it's, you know, very similar. You know, our events team are now doing you know, COVID testing sites, or, you know, working supporting large retail customers, or whatever it might be. And I suppose that mindsets are that, you know, that there's certain branches that look forward to, you know, the event season, and kind of, as Peter's alluded to there as well. And I suppose COVID's brought with it the additional stress and pressures, you know, on already a workforce that sometimes can have underlying stress and pressures, such as, you know, finances, etc. So, you know, the more we can do as a business to support them and to kind of, you know, give them access to their earned wages, or link that into EAP or GP 24/7, whatever it might be, I think that, you know, kind of organisations, it's the responsible thing to do, you know, and, you know, realistically, that without our frontline employees, we don't have a business. So yes, there's plenty of work there, and it's obviously just, I suppose, biding our time until we return to some sort of normality, whatever that looks like post-COVID, and however long that takes.
Yeah, tough times indeed. I know your strategy for success. Well, I don't know your strategy for success. Indeed, I'm going to ask you about that now. But without giving away any trade secrets, you have maintained an excellent reputation in the market. So, in these challenging times, how are you managing to engage your staff, and what is your strategy for success? Peter?
In terms of engaging staff, I think communication is key, and looking at all the different avenues you can do that. You know, we have a monthly newsletter. It's not enough on its own. We do Facebook Live sessions, not enough on their own. We do management by walking around, which is a new initiative we started during the pandemic, actually, whereby we take the whole support team. So I'm talking not just the operational managers. You know, we'll have the HR manager, marketing manager, the vetting officer, the accountant, and on a Friday afternoon, we'll start later in the day, and we'll spend some time at the close of the day planning organised activity and a bomb burst across the UK to go out and visit some people on the front line, and rewarding them, taking some pictures, really getting into the depths and nitty-gritty of anything that's been bothering them, and we have quite a big impact all in one go. We'll manage to get out and see 50 people in an evening face to face. But this communication, it needs to be ongoing all the time. You can't do enough of it, and especially, you know, interpreting government guidance, and that could be COVID safe guidance, it could be furlough guidance. it could be where we're going in the future. It's a constant task. I think, I don't know what James has been like, but we've had to work harder than ever this year in a really competitive environment, probably for a smaller return as well.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Peter. I can appreciate that. And following on from what Peter's just said, James, how are you engaging your staff, and how are you letting them know about the seemingly ever-changing regulations and practices they're facing?
Yeah, it is a minefield, and I think that communication is key throughout all this. We've got various channels. We use Microsoft Teams, which all our staff are on Microsoft Teams. We use the engagement pack through Timegate as well. We've got a closed Facebook group that we communicate through that as well. We have a channel on our Teams which is dedicated to COVID-19 updates. So as soon as any key updates, so the Boris Johnson announcement around lockdown on a Saturday night, we were able to push out a message that says, once we, following the announcement, once we understand it further, we will let you know, we will summarize this and let you know. We created a specific COVID-19 employee query form so that they can submit that. That comes through to HR, and that is dealt with in a kind of a structured way as well. Peter's already mentioned it, but site visits are absolutely key. So our supervisors, managers and directors get out and see people. We have a kind of a questionnaire, but we have a welfare form that we fill in, and a lot of that's free typed as well, so that any issues around how they may be feeling, and they may have a better report with one supervisor or one manager than another, they're able to share that with it as well. But it is that constant moving piece, and what we try to do is we try to answer as much as we can, as proactively as we can, and then mop up any of the exceptions after that.
Thanks, James. Cheers. Carrying on from that, really, security and FM staff they haven't stopped through the pandemic, of course, and clearly there's going to be issues they're going to face. Do you see these issues caused by the possible stress of working through the pandemic, and how are they coped with in their working environment? Peter, do you experience the problems your frontline people are having?
Yeah, and we have seen an increase. We operate a 24/7 mental health advice line, and although we don't know who's called it, it's completely anonymous. We do get summative data, and we have seen an increase during the pandemic. It's not easy. It's not easy not having that social interaction. It's not easy with the hours that we put in sometimes. I think we're operating in such a different world right now to where we were 12 months ago. And it is a lot for the human brain to sort of take in and be at ease with. So.
Thanks, Peter. James, are your people reporting problems? Are you experiencing any issues caused by the pandemic and your people working through?
I think a lot of it, if I'm honest, is caused by mixed messages and guidance, I think. And it's kind of, you take employee A and employee B and give them the guidance, and you'll get two different interpretations of that guidance, I suppose. So a lot of my kind of perception around all of this is that even pre-COVID, as I said before, there was lots of stresses, lots of underlying kind of things that generally people, not just in our industry, but in many industries, don't talk about. And this is added to that as well. But I suppose, again, coming back onto the wage stream scenario, and what we've seen is that there's no kind of pressure on people to do additional shifts, but whereas people are picking up additional shifts because they know that whilst it's going to increase their cost as travel costs, they're not going to wait until payday to fund those costs as well. So it's not cancelling it out completely, but I think it's going some way to help that that kind of those additional stresses on top of the underlying stresses. And as Peter said, you know, likewise, we've got an EAP that we can, you know, people have access to, and we can refer people on to, which covers off the key points, you know, financial stress, bereavement, money matters, etc. And we don't get the stats for that for whatever reason, but I do know that of people that have used that more recently.
Going back a bit to sort of beginning of the conversation, how did you come across earned wage access, and when is this? Has this been a recent discovery to yourself, Peter?
Yeah, it was our head of people. She came across it, and I've no idea, without asking the question, I've no idea how, but I know she'll scour HR magazines and she gets her updates from a CIPD point of view.
Brilliant. James, when did you find out about earned wage access?
It was early on this year, and it was from another FM provider through LinkedIn and social media. And at the time, there wasn't a link between the version of TimeGet that we've got into WageStream. But after a couple of months of kind of conversation with WageStream, they then obviously released the API that allowed the link to happen. We put it in the middle of March, just before lockdown. And that couldn't have been any better in terms of timing. And it wasn't planned. We had no foresight that COVID was about to hit. But we know from the surveys that have been done that it's had a significant impact since COVID.
No, thanks a lot, James. We've already spoken about your staff engagement, but shift fulfillment at the moment, is there an issue with that? I'm not sure whether the pandemic would have made an impact or not, especially with you already saying you had to move people around. The people you were using for events are now doing retail and things like that. But is there an issue with shift fulfillment at the moment, Peter?
There's not an issue. We found it more challenging than usual, especially when the government is switching on and off guidance and advice. You know, I go back to it, especially in the nighttime economy. You know, they've had a really tough time. I think there's a lot of momentum behind where the industry thinks it should be, but allowing the industry to sort of open up with restrictions was tough, but manageable. Open up with restrictions, but close by 2200 on the dot is just not manageable. And we are putting a lot of effort into resourcing our nighttime economy customers, you know, of which there's perhaps 100, and every single one was affected drastically. And I don't feel right as a supplier to them enforcing minimum shifts or enforcing contracted hours when they're not getting customers through the door. So juggling that, you know, and switching it on and off for the workforce has been really, really tough. Yeah.
James, are you having trouble with shift fulfillment at the moment, or engagement issues around that?
I think that shift fulfillment is a consistent challenge for any labour provider. I think that it's peaks and troughs, but as has already been mentioned, the conflicting guidance doesn't help, and that that's been further come to light over the last couple of days, actually, in relation to shielding and the requirements to shield, which is now changed. And as of yesterday, those who should clinically shield, for example, are receiving letters to say you should not go to work. But that wasn't the guidance that was given in the press conference at the time. So, you know, we shouldn't be learning this from our employees. We should be. This is the sort of stuff that, as employers, we should be aware of proactively from that. So, those are the challenges that we face, is around the ever-changing piece, and you know, it helps having not only WageStream. We apply short notice shift premiums, for example, for those that jump on shifts within so many hours notice. But that combined effort really helps get the boots on the ground and gets those shifts covered.
Thanks a lot.
To add to that, Rollo, I think, you know, I picked up on a conversation yesterday with one of our ops managers, and he was, you know, aghast by the conversation he'd just had with someone on the front line who said, by the way, I've done 4 shifts so far this month. I'm just going to flexi furlough for the rest of the month. And, it was that interpretation that there's an option here, and our sort of strategy with the flexible furlough will apply it in geographical locations where we've had to support people, but we should not be relying on government handouts when there's work there.
And I have to again, I have to concur with that, because we, at the start of lockdown version 1, some of our events guys were furloughed, and we'd things progressed, and then we took the decision to bring people back off furlough, and there was not many, I don't want to do an injustice, but there was a percentage that felt that they were very comfortable with furlough and didn't want to come back to work, even though that there was sufficient work available. So there are challenges for the employees, and I think what's sometimes forgotten is that there are also challenges for employers. And it's that big game of Jenga and that big jigsaw piece of putting all the bits together to ultimately to look after our employees and to deliver a service to our customers.
That's great. As you say, there are some strange and mysterious perceptions out there caused by confusion about the government message, clearly. But when it comes to strange perceptions, I've seen on social media a couple of people who really didn't get the idea of earned wage access, and they were trying to argue with me about how dangerous it is, what a nightmare it can be, and there are people with mental health issues that might abuse the earned wage access system. But what controls have you both put in place to prevent earned wage access being abused, Peter?
So I think the first one which you talked about is the sort of percentage drawdown, but I know that WageStream have got a lot, so you can limit the percentage drawdown, you can limit the gross amount and monetary value drawdown, you can limit the frequency, the number of occurrences. So there are a lot of controls, if you saw it being an issue. We have had to remind people a few times. I think when we've looked at some of the summative data, we've seen people who might have took 3 or 4 drawdowns in the month, and it's obviously better to just take one because of the fixed fee. I think it's £1 or so, £1.50 or so. You don't want to pay that 4 times if you only need to pay it once.
Peter, on that note, do you know the sort of average amount that is being drawn down by your staff? Is it excessive, or is it just to cover small bills, that sort of thing?
It is the small stuff. I don't think we've got people who are taking everything they've earned out. We're talking, £100, £200 maximum, and it's not the full workforce who's using it. So the options there, the flexibility is there, and we all need it sometimes. Unexpected things happen. The exhaust falls off the car.
Yeah, sure.
You need to get to work, and I'd far rather they used this than went to a payday lender or took credit cards, for example. It's just another tool in someone's arsenal to sort of flex what they're doing. Yeah. But if you come back to me after you spoke to James, I'll try and find out the exact sort of numbers that people have took. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Peter. Now, James, I know you mentioned earlier where FGH have a maximum of 50% that can be taken during a pay period. Exclusec has chosen to limit that to 40%. How's that working out, and how are your people treating the system in general?
I mean, for us, it was it was a starting point, and I think that that's certainly open for conversation, and we have got some plans to kind of consult with staff on that figure and to whether that's working for them enough, whether that's sufficient. In terms of our usage, one of the big pluses for us is that we've got access to the data, so we can see the streams that are being done, we can see who's doing it, we can see how many times they're doing it. We've experienced exactly the same as Peter mentioned around multiple drawdowns, and that allows us to have a very, very informal chat with somebody to say, you do realise that if you reduce this, if you just try to budget a little bit more, if you try to forecast where you need to be, you can reduce the convenience fees, down to 1 or 2 as opposed to 4 or 5, etc. What it also allows us to do as well is to kind of really highlight any employees, which is like a red flag, or who may be every day drawing down their earned wage every single day. And we did have one of these very, very recently. And what that allows us to do is to ask a question, are you okay? And if you add that to the other kind of well-being benefits that we've got, we can signpost them to the EAP, which can offer them, both our EAP, which has financial advice and financial support there, but also through WageStream, there is also that support there as well. And so if we hadn't had WageStream, we maybe hadn't have seen that, and we maybe hadn't have kind of known that may have been a potential issue for that employee. And there is that fine line between work and home life, but the more we can do to support employees to, if they have got challenges or habits or things that become a challenge, it allows us to be aware of that from the outset, really. And not everyone that enrolls on WageStream does so to draw down their wages. We have people that enroll on WageStream simply to track their wages in real time. So not everyone that is enrolled is drawing down funds. And we see amounts, again, from £20, £30 up to, I think, £200-300 sometimes. And again, that fluctuates by the time of the month as well.
Okay, cheers, James. So WageStream, you can track your salary, you can draw down up to a fixed percentage of money already earned. There's a savings mechanism that's been spoken about, and that's all app access. Do you think technology like this is helping to retain and motivate your staff, Peter?
It definitely helps, and let's be straight, without being sort of too ageist, this sort of technology, it's far more accessible and easier to use for some of the younger people coming through, who are just used to that sort of everything's done on an app, and we do not speak on the phone. In terms of motivating, I'll give you an example. If my ops team's trying to cover a shift tonight, we're on the 11th of November. If someone goes to work that shift, we process wages on a calendar month, so they're not going to be paid for another 30 days. And where's the real sort of motivation there in this sort of new day where we employ a lot of students, COVID aside? The students should be able to go out, work hard today, earn some money, and spend it this weekend partying with the pals. So it does motivate in that respect. Yeah, and I think otherwise it's just another sort of, it's a tool for us, one of many tools to assist.
Cheers, Peter. Thank you. James, are you do you believe that WageStream is helping you with staff retention and motivation?
Yeah, I think so. And we add the WageStream benefit onto all our job adverts, and we make it very clear from the outset that we use WageStream and a brief synopsis of what that is. And as Peter said, it allows us to remind, if we are in the situation where we've got a short notice shift or where it might be, it allows our schedulers to kind of remind the employee that tomorrow or tonight, once that shift has been approved, they will have access to a percentage of that will get them through whatever they need to get through to do. So whereas the challenge may have been a little bit more, rather than favor based previously, it's now more kind of quantified with access to technology, and technology is only going to develop, and we're only going to see more of this stuff coming in to industries. So it's good for to lead the way in terms of these sort of technologies as opposed to being behind.
Cheers, James. Now, I'm very conscious of the time, and we're getting a lot of good questions coming in. So if you don't mind, we're going to go to a few questions that have been coming in from people watching. From Rachel Ellis. Thank you, Rachel. This is a good one. How much company resource is needed to support an offering like WageStream? Peter, is it very resource intensive? Does it take your people a lot of time to administer?
Going to WageStream was one of the things I did. The primary reason we went to WageStream was to reduce the workload in the support team. So before WageStream, people filled out the form. It came to us for a wage advance. At that point, an administrator had to go into the system. Have they earned this money already or not? How many advances have they had recently? If they hadn't, there was a decision that had to be made. This person wants to borrow £100 or an advance of £100. They've not worked a shift this month. There's a risk there. Then they had to process it with the bank. Then they had to let the payroll department know to take a deduction off at the end of the month. There's chance of error. That was labour intensive. That was expensive. The primary driver for us shifting to WageStream was to automate all that and free up the time of the support team. So on the contrary,
it's saving you time, not creating problems for you.
Yeah,
can't be bad. James, question for you. From Paul Hughes. First of all, how have you found the use of WageStream and the Timegate integration? How's that been working with your staff? And do you think it's helped staff retention? James?
Yeah, so the implementation was quite, once the API was signed off, the integration was quite simple. I think from inception to implementation, it was about 4 to 6 weeks. And because of the connection between Timegate and WageStream, that there is very, very little for us to do in terms of actions, really. As long as, once the arbitrations are done, midnight comes along, and then they've got access to their earned wages. So yeah, for us it was a very simple process, and we know we are retaining staff as a result of, one of the factors of that is through WageStream.
Thanks a lot, James. Peter, I'll ask you this one. Well, Emma Walker is rather concerned. Security officers often work hand to mouth. Does this not create a vicious circle with employees taking wages early and then later in the month when they need to pay their rent and bills, etc., therefore making the employee take early payment again and again, which creates this vicious circle? Peter, have you experienced this vicious circle? I think we mentioned the safeguards you've put in place, but has this cropped up as a problem for you?
It hasn't done, although I'm maybe not the best person to answer that, not being too hands-on. We've got people in a HR team who would manage that. But like James said, you can see early and intervene early and have that control. At least you know about it if it's happening, and then you can intervene if you need to. How many organisations do not know and can't have that watchful look over what's happening with the workforce because they're off to Wonga.com and they're taking a payday advance from them at a stupid amount of interest with a crazy late payments as well. I've seen people borrow £100 from Wonga.com. They need to pay back 130 in a month. If they don't make that payment, they get a £30 fine added to it. All of a sudden, the £100 you borrow has cost you 160, 190, and this keeps happening. So yeah, I'd say better the devil you know. There is that risk, always that risk, isn't there? But this money's been earned. They've gone out and done a shift. They've earned the money. Yeah, that's the difference. That's almost like the advance or the money they're getting. It's backed with a bit of collateral.
Thank you very much, Peter. I know.
So, well, if I could just quickly add on to that, is that going back onto what we said before, is on its own, it's good, but if you mix that in with other support mechanisms, it's fantastic. In terms of that, so it can be as hands off or as hands on as you want it to be. Personally, I look at WageStream every day, the portal every day, for those reasons. I can see, I'm looking at the portal now and I can see how many streams we've had, how many visits we've had. It's around that visibility. And as Peter said, they've earned that wage, they're entitled to it. And actually we could be helping them, not hindering them by them having that access.
No, that's great. Good point. Thanks a lot, James. One last question. Now, apologies if I get your name wrong. It's from Effian Roberts. Would you increase the percentage you both give at the moment? And if not, why not? And would you change that percentage on an individual basis? If a particular person said, listen, can we put my access up to 60%? Would that be problematic, or does it have to be company-wide? Peter?
I think the system's got that level of flexibility. However, I'd probably want to know a bit more, is it something that's just cropped up this month, or is there an issue? Or are we helping with some form of capital purchase? And that's one thing we've never minded doing, and we've lent people enough money to top up a deposit on a house for a mortgage, for example, or someone who has got into some really bad debt and maybe wants to pay that off over a year, 2 years, interest free. Let's wrap that debt up and really help you out. And I'd say I'd be more inclined to go down a sort of interest-free staff loan. That's my personal opinion, how we'd manage with this. Although I do think the system could cope with that.
James, is this something you've encountered at all? People asking for the percentage to be upped from 40% for any particular reason?
I think it was a question at the start. I think since that's not really been challenged. I mean, I probably wouldn't be comfortable with any more than 50% because obviously, you know, we need to make sure that there is sufficient there for their tax and NI obligations, etc. You know, I mean, we always said from the start that we would review it from that 40%. We do monthly surveys, we do specific surveys. We did a survey pre-wage stream around the feasibility of this, and it's something that I'm more than willing to look at and probably add a question to our next survey to see what the appetite for an increased percentage is. But at the same, you know, but my preference is on a company-wide basis rather than an individual basis, because of the reasons of fairness and, you know, person A, person B should have access to the same percentage of their money. And as Peter said, we have in the past helped people outside of wage stream, pre-wage stream, with matters that, you know, we were able to settle and claim back through wages. So yeah, that my preference in my business would be a company-wide percentage.
Thanks a lot, James. Now, time has run out, I'm afraid. I'd like to thank our guests, of course, James Bancroft and Peter Harrison. I appreciate your time. I'd like to thank Team Software for making this all possible, and of course, WageStream for their fantastic earned wage access system. There will be a recording of this webinar coming out via WageStream's website and social media channels, so keep an eye on that. Thank you very much indeed for watching.
Thanks, Rollo. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
James.
for now.